Hey friends, Modern Horizons 3 Commander Precons are being revealed this week, and today we just got the full deck list of the Eldrazi Precon. This is a 5-color, colorless matters Eldrazi deck. So in this video, we're going to check out all of the cards in the deck, starting with the 15 cards that are brand new and exclusive to the Eldrazi Incursion Precon. And then we'll check out the rest of the deck, the reprints, and give my closing thoughts on the Precon as a whole. But before we begin, 2 quick reminders. First, if you like this sort of content and want to be informed when the next preview videos come out, be sure to like and subscribe. And number 2, if you want to pre-order these sweet new Precons, you can do so at our sponsor, cardkingdom.com/MTG Goldfish. Alright, we begin with the face commander, Ulalik Fuse Atrocity. This is a 5-mana commander that you can cast with hybrid mana, either colorless mana or Wooburg mana. And it's a legendary creature Eldrazi. It's a 2/5 and it has the Void. And that means despite it having Wooburg in its casting cost and having a commander color identity of 5 colors, so you can run all colors in the deck, it itself has no color thanks to the Void, which means it counts as a colorless spell. It doesn't count as a colored spell on the stack or in your hand or on the battlefield. So if there are cards that care about casting colorless spells or having colorless permanents, this counts as that. And then it has a really powerful triggered ability. Whenever you cast an Eldrazi spell, you may pay 2 colorless mana. If you do, copy all spells you control, then copy all other activated and triggered abilities you control. You may choose new targets for the copies. So Ulalik being the face commander kind of tells you what this Precon is all about. It's first of all, it's all about Eldrazi. This cares about casting Eldrazi spells, and it itself is an Eldrazi. And the fact that it is the Void and also requires colorless mana tips you off on the secondary theme of the Precon 2, which is colorless matters. And the payoff is really, really good here. If you cast an Eldrazi spell, you can pay 2 colorless mana and you double the value of your Eldrazi spell. So what are we doing with Ulalik? Well, it's pretty simple. We're going to be casting powerful Eldrazi spells, and then Ulalik are going to double the value of those Eldrazi spells. For example, if we cast Artisan of Kozilek, which is a 9-mana spell, and then we spend 2 additional colorless mana with Ulalik's ability, we get a copy of the Artisan of Kozilek, which is a nice 10/9 Annihilator 2, but we also get the cast trigger of Artisan of Kozilek as well copied, which allows us to reanimate another creature card from the graveyard directly onto the battlefield. So for a whopping 11 mana, we get 2 Artisan of Kozileks, we get 2 reanimation triggers, and then we have 2 10/9s with Annihilator 2 on the battlefield. Now, things get even more fun if we cast Eldrazi spells at instant speed with other cool triggered or activated abilities on the stack already. There's not too many Eldrazi spells that you can cast at instant speed, but notable examples of this that you can find in the Precon itself is Ulamog's Nullifier. It's an Eldrazi creature that can counter a spell at instant speed. And also Crib Swap, this is a kindred spell and it has changeling, so it also counts as an Eldrazi spell when you're casting it, and it just straight up just exiles a creature. So for example, if you're attacking with a bunch of Annihilator Eldrazi like the Artisan of Kozilek, with the Annihilator trigger on the stack, you can cast an instant speed Eldrazi spell like Crib Swap, and if you pay the triggered ability on Ulalik, you get not only an extra copy of the Crib Swap, but you also copy the Annihilator triggers as well to completely blow out your opponents. So yeah, Ulalik is super fun. It has a lot of explosive potential, and I'm really, really excited to start jamming this commander. Now, fairly recently, we got another Eldrazi Precon, or well, like Eldrazi Precon, and it was led by Zuldok Void Gorger. Unlike Ulalik, which is a colorless matters Eldrazi deck, but you still have access to all 5 colors of mana when deck building, Zuldok restricts you to no colors of mana, only colorless spells. And also, it didn't really have that much of an Eldrazi theme. It was more of like a colorless matters theme, and really it was like an artifact deck, honestly. Now, Zuldok's payoff is really, really good. If you're casting colorless spells, mana value 7 or greater, you get double Cascade, which is insane value. However, if you actually want an Eldrazi deck, Ululek is by far the superior option. It gives you a far larger card pool to work with. The ability, I would argue, is actually much stronger because double cascading is really good. However, most of the Zuludok's deck and basically any colorless Eldrazi's deck is just like mana rocks, like you have your Mind Stones or whatever, to just cast your big spells. So if you're double cascading with Zuludok, chances are you're not hitting other giant Eldrazi or big game-winning spells. You're just hitting mana rocks and stuff like that. So that's less exciting with Zuludok's ability in the command zone at the very least. Whereas Ululek's ability, you have more control over it and just a more powerful effect. And the other annoying thing about Zuludok and just all color decks in general is if you're trying to do a big ramp deck like Zuludok requires you to cast 7 mana value spells or greater, you're going to have such a high reliance on mana rocks that you are particularly vulnerable to blowout potential from just mass artifact removal. If somebody just destroys all your artifacts, all your mana rocks, you're basically out of the game. You can't do anything about it, and you have the smallest card pool possible to protect your engines or bounce back from that bad board state. Whereas with Ululek, you can just run like all the best, green ramp sources and land ramp, and you have more potential options to protect your board state to avoid blowouts like that. So yeah, even if Ululek's abilities were weaker, I would still say it's a much stronger deck overall in the command zone, just because you have access to 5 colors of mana versus 0, right? So yeah, Ululek is hands down the better Eldrazi commander. But Zuludok is still fantastic in the 99 of an Ululek deck. Alright, now let's look at the secondary commander that is featured in the Precon. It's not the face commander, but it can lead the Precon. You can just swap it into the command zone. This is Azlask, the Swelling Scourge. This is a 3-mana colorless 2/2 legendary creature Eldrazi. Whenever it or another colorless creature you control dies, you get an experience counter, and you can pay Wooburg. Creatures you control get +X until end of turn, where X is the number of experience counters you have. Scions and spawns you control gain indestructible and Annihilator 1 until end of turn. So while Ululek is focused heavily on casting Eldrazi spells, and this is just like generic Eldrazi and Eldrazi Titans, Azlask is actually pumping up your Eldrazi tokens. So there's a bunch of Eldrazi cards that are not as strong in terms of like big creatures that you want to be copying, but they make a bunch of spawn tokens or scion tokens. And these are 0/1 creatures or 1/1 Eldrazi spawn creatures, and you can sacrifice them to add 1 colorless mana. They're basically there initially to just kind of ramp you into your big Eldrazi spells, but Azlask and a couple new cards that are coming in Modern Horizons 3 kind of allow you to pump up your Eldrazi spawn and Eldrazi scions so they become actually big threats that win you the game in their own right. So I really like Azlask. If you're focusing on Eldrazi, but you want to focus on Eldrazi tokens, which is a really cool twist on the Eldrazi archetype, then Azlask is just far superior in that regard. And Ululek is much better off when you're focusing on traditional Eldrazi Titans and just big Eldrazi Haymaker spells instead. And also Azlask is also particularly nice with an aristocrat sub-theme. And, like all the Eldrazi spawns and scions, they want to be sacrificed for mana anyway, so this makes perfect sense, but you can lean into aristocrats as a sub-theme. There's 2 particular ones, creatures that generate Eldrazi spawns and scions when you're sacrificing things. I think it's Pot of Ulamog, and I forget the other one. It's an Eldrazi that has the Void. Both of them are going to be MVPs in an Azlask deck because they reward you for sacrificing and they generate Eldrazi tokens, which are the 2 things Azlask wants to be doing. So it's still Eldrazi, it's still 5-color colorless matters, but at the same time, it's a unique twist where it's focusing on the tokens instead of like the big Haymaker creatures. So those are the 2 new commanders in the deck, and now we're going to check out the 13 other brand new cards that are exclusive to the Precon. We're going to start things off with Eldrazi Confluence. This is a 4-mana 2 and double colorless instant that says choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. So target creature gets +3/-3 until end of turn, or exile target non-land permanent, then return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control, or create a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion creature token with sacrifice this creature, add 1 colorless. So this is some nice added utility to the Eldrazi deck. It can snipe small creatures. It could blink creatures that have powerful ETB effects. There's going to be some Eldrazi's that we're going to be looking at, for example, that enter the battlefield and make a bunch of like Scion tokens or whatever. Or it can save a creature from targeted removal. That's nice too. Or at the very least, you can just make a bunch of Scion creature tokens. They can act as ramp for future turns, or they can act as a surprise chump blockers when you need them. And also, very importantly, it's a colorless spell. It's not a Kindred Eldrazi spell, which is a little bit of a bummer. It would have worked even better with Ulek had it been so, but overall, it's a really great card in an Eldrazi deck. Next, we have Eldritch Immunity. For 1 colorless mana, you have a Kindred instant Eldrazi, so it counts as an Eldrazi spell, so it triggers Ulek and other Eldrazi Matter stuff. That's really cool. Target creature you control gains protection from each color until end of turn, and it has Overload of 4 and a colorless. So you can either, for 1 mana, instant speed give your creature protection from everything, or all colors rather, or you can overload it for 5 mana and give your entire board protection from all colors. So this type of card is very flexible. It can protect your creature from, like your most important creature, from a Swords to Plowshare or any sort of target removal. It can also make sure that anybody attacking you is going to allow you to just have a lot of chump blocks. Like let's say you have a bunch of like Eldrazi Scions and somebody's swinging at you for lethal. You can give all your creatures like protection so they can all chump reliably and not die. Or you can also allow yourself to swing for lethal. You can give your entire board protection from everything, so no blockers can block you, except for colorless creatures, I guess. So like colorless artifact creatures or whatever can still block you, but if it's just a bunch of colored creatures, you can just get around them that way. And it also protects you from mass board wipes if they are in the red variety. So there's like Blasphemous Act, for example, deals 13 damage to each creature, and it's a red spell. So if you give your creatures your entire board protection from red with Eldritch Immunity, they take no damage and they survive, which is quite nice. Now, this card also works well enough outside of Eldrazi decks, but obviously it works best in an Eldrazi deck. It's a colorless spell, and it's even a Kindred Eldrazi spell, so it triggers Eldrazi Matters effects like our commander. Next, we've got Selective Obliteration, which is a new colorless Matters board wipe, which I really like. It's 3 and 2 colorless for a sorcery that says each player chooses a color, then exile each permanent unless it's colorless or it's only the colors its controller chose. So basically, this is going to be a very potent board wipe against multicolor decks. If you are a colorless deck, then yay, you don't lose anything. And if you're a monocolor deck, you're probably not going to lose much at all. It's also important to note that you can only save monocolored permanents with Selective Obliteration. If your opponents or you, for example, have a multicolored creature or permanent on the battlefield, there's no saving it. It will get exiled. So this is very powerful against basically any multicolored deck, because at the very least, they're probably going to have like their commander, which is multicolored, on the battlefield, and they're for sure going to be losing it. Whereas in this deck, the colorless deck, you're not going to be losing anything. So you're always going to be happy with it. And anybody who's multicolored, which is probably the majority of commander decks out there, are going to be losing some amount of stuff. They'll still get to keep the strongest monocolored permanent they have on the battlefield, but the multicolored stuff and the other monocolored permanents that they didn't select are all gone. So I think this board wipe is very powerful in the deck. It's not the most powerful board wipe available to colorless Matters. I think All Is Dust and Ugin the Spirit Dragon are both much more powerful because they're going to get rid of basically everything except for your opponent's artifacts while leaving your entire board untouched. So those are both like S tier, the best cards you could put in your deck. And All Is Dust is actually in the Precon as a reprint, which is really sweet. Ugin is not, but I mean, if you want to shell out like $30+ for Ugin, I highly recommend it if you're trying to bling out this deck. But still, Selective Obliteration is really powerful, and I'm happy to run all 3 in my colorless Eldrazi deck. Next, we've got Inversion Behemoth. This is a 4 mana, 2 and double colorless, 2/9 Eldrazi creature, and it says at the beginning of combat on your turn, switch the power and toughness of any number of target creatures until end of turn. Now, this card is interesting. It itself can swing as a 9/2, which is pretty significant, and it can mess up combat math. It can make creatures with high toughness more vulnerable to small sniping removal spells. But overall, I don't know. I don't know how to evaluate this card in a vacuum. In a vacuum, it's awful. But you know, in the context of the rest of the precon, it's probably a lot better. We'll have to see the rest of the cards. Next, we have Ulamog's Dreadsire. This is a 10 mana, 10/10 creature Eldrazi. It has Vigilance and Ward. Sacrifice a permanent with mana value 1 or greater. So you can't just sacrifice a random token like a treasure. You sacrifice something somewhat significant. And you can tap it, create a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi creature token. Now, this is just a fun card. It's just like a big Haymaker Eldrazi spell. You love to see it. Obviously, it gets much more powerful if you can give it haste, because then you can immediately cast it, give it haste, like put a Lightning Greaves on it or something, swing in for 10, and then make a 10/10 on the same turn. Like, that's the ideal. It gets even better if you can like throw in Sting, the Glinting Dagger. Like, just Eldrazi, big Eldrazi Titans in general, they usually don't have haste. So like the best thing I could recommend to a big Eldrazi Haymaker deck is just find haste, but particularly Sting, the Glinting Dagger. It gives it haste, but then also it gets to untap the equipped creature every single turn. So on your opponent's turn, you're also making a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi token. So that means if you're in a 4-player game with 3 opponents, you get to make 4 10/10 Eldrazi creature tokens per turn cycle, which is absolutely bananas, and you just swung in with a 10/10 on your turn. That's really good. So yeah, think about Sting if you're running Ulamog's Dreadsire. I highly recommend it. Next, we have Twins of Discord. This is a 7 mana, 8/6 creature Eldrazi, and it says whenever you attack, choose odd or even. Creatures with mana value of that quality can't block this turn, and each other colorless creature you control has Bloodthirst 2. So this is a callback to Void Winter. It's a lot weaker because it doesn't mess up your opponents entirely, but it has that effect of when you're attacking, your opponents can't block, which is quite sweet. And it also works much better in the token version of Eldrazi, where you can attack and deal some damage to your opponents, and then afterwards make a bunch of like Eldrazi spawn tokens, and they all come with 2+1/+1 counters on them. That's like the idea behind it. So it's really good in the token variety, less good in like the big Eldrazi Haymaker variety, but also the fact that you're removing a bunch of blockers from the equation when you're attacking is just really powerful. And it's also an 8/6 by itself. Next, we've got Spawnbed Protector. This is a 7 mana colorless, 6/8 creature Eldrazi. At the beginning of your end step, return up to 1 target Eldrazi creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Create 2 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion creature tokens with sacrifice this creature, add colorless. So this is nice thematic Eldrazi recursion, and it also promotes the Eldrazi token theme as well. Obviously, it's a slam dunk in the Eldrazi archetype. It's thematic, it's synergistic, and it just is a really powerful card in that archetype. Next, we have Mutated Cultist. This is a 3 mana black devoid creature. It's a 1/3 creature Eldrazi horror. And when you cast this spell, remove all counters from up to 1 target permanent or opponent. The next spell you cast this turn costs 1 less to cast for each counter removed this way, and it has Death Touch. Now, this card is okay in like a generic Eldrazi deck. It's an Eldrazi. It counts as colorless. You could remove +1/+1 counters or beneficial counters off your opponent's creatures or whatever. That's all well and good, and it's like a decent blocker, I guess. But it's more fun if you actually build around it yourself. So, for example, if you have Dark Depths in your deck, you can play Dark Depths, then cast Mutated Cultist, remove all the counters from Dark Depths, which is all 10 ice counters. You get to make a 20/20 Black Avatar creature token with flying, which is super fun. And then you can just cast Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger for free. So that's the magical Christmas land scenario, and I'm all for it. Next, we have Angelic Aberration. This is a 6 mana white devoid 4/4 creature Eldrazi Angel. It has flying vigilance, and when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice any number of creatures with base power or toughness 1 or less. Create that many 4/4 colorless Eldrazi Angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance. So in the context of this precon, you get to sacrifice all your Eldrazi spawn and scion tokens and turn them into 4/4 flying vigilance creatures that will smash face and hopefully end the game very quickly. So that's super fun. And also notably, this is not a cast trigger. This is an enter the battlefield effect. So any blink or reanimation or any of that good stuff allows you to immediately cash in your Scions and Spawns and turn them into Angels whenever you want. So that's a really good finisher for the Eldrazi token deck. The next card we've got is Benthic Oddity. This is a 7-mana blue devoid, 7/8 creature Eldrazi Serpent. When you cast a spell for each opponent, choose a creature that player controls, create a token that's a copy of one of those creatures, except its base power is equal to the total power of those creatures, its base toughness is equal to the total toughness of those creatures, and it's an Eldrazi creature. So this is another cool top-end Eldrazi. It's a 7-mana 7/8 that basically says choose the coolest creature that your opponents have on the battlefield, or like something that has a really powerful enter the battlefield trigger, like an Eternal Witness or something, and then just make a super jacked up version of it. It's going to be like a 10/10 Eldrazi creature that has a really, really powerful ability also. Not much to say here. It's kind of board state dependent, so you can't just cast this willy-nilly unless you have some good creatures that you want to be copying with its ability or targeting with its ability. But nonetheless, I think that's a pretty easy criteria to make. At the very least, you're paying 7 mana for a 7/8 and then like another really, really big creature. So that's nice. It's just cool. I like it. Then we've got a lower cost Eldrazi. This is Bismuth Mindrender. It's a 4-mana black devoid 4/3 creature Eldrazi, and it has menace, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. You may cast that card by paying life equal to the spell's mana value rather than paying its mana cost. So this card is a colorless Eldrazi, so it works really well in the Precon, and it's card advantage and mana advantage. If you get to deal combat damage with it, you're stealing a card off your opponent's library, which is not as synergistic as your own. However, you do get to cast it for free by just spending life instead of paying the mana for it, which is really nice. But the card gets even better outside of the Eldrazi Precon deck and in the 99 of other types of decks. For example, Prosper Tombbound. You like casting cards from exile, so not only do you get to cast a spell from exile with the Bismuth, but you also get to make a treasure token at the same time and really pop off from there. And also theft decks like Don Andreas. You get to steal a spell from your opponent's library, and then either you're making treasure tokens or you're making a creature that is now a +2/+2 Menace Death Touch Pirate, which is really cool. Next we have Chittering Dispatcher. This is a 3-mana green devoid 2/3 creature Eldrazi drone and has Myriad, and when it leaves the battlefield, create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token with sacrifices, add 1 colorless. So this is a cool take on Myriad. Instead of having like a powerful enter the battlefield trigger or whatever, it actually has a leave the battlefield trigger. So you attack with the Chittering Dispatcher, you make a copy of the Chittering Dispatcher attacking each other opponent you have, and then when it leaves the battlefield, either if it dies or just like end of turn or whatever, you get to make an Eldrazi spawn. So it's really unique style of ramp, but also, you know, it encourages the Eldrazi token theme as well. This is the ideal type of 3-drop you want to see in the deck. You play a turn 3, you start swinging turn 4, and then you make a bunch of Eldrazi spawn creatures that either you cash in to ramp out your bigger spells, your haymakers, or just, you know, pump up with Azlask or the other stuff. And the final new card in the deck is Hideous Taskmaster. This is a 7-mana red devoid 7/2 creature Eldrazi, and it says when you cast a spell for each opponent, you gain control of up to 1 target creature that player controls until end of turn. Untap those creatures, they gain Trample, Haste, and Annihilator 1 until end of turn, and it has Trample, Haste, and Annihilator 1. So the Taskmaster is the thematic Eldrazi version of Molten Primordial, a card I absolutely love. This is a finisher spell that is going to for sure kill one opponent, possibly kill multiple opponents if you steal big enough creatures. I've casted a lot of Molten Primordials in my many years, decade plus of playing Commander, and it's always impressed me every single time. I think it's still very underrated to this day. I run in my Perforos deck, that's a sneak attack deck, but if you're not worrying about, you know, sneaking it out or blinking it, Hideous Taskmaster is just way better. Not only are you stealing the same amount of creatures, it's a bigger body, it deals 1 more damage when it's attacking, and it has Annihilator, and it gives your stolen creatures Trample and Annihilator as well, which is beautiful. Yeah, I absolutely love this card. I love it in the Eldrazi deck, obviously it's the best there, but if you are interested in a Molten Primordial effect and you have no interest in like reanimating or sneaking it in or whatever, you're always going to be hard casting the spell, then Hideous Taskmaster is going to be an awesome finisher for you. Way better than the Molten Primordial in those cases. All right, so we covered the 15 brand new cards exclusive of the Precon, and now we're going to be checking out the rest of the deck, the reprints. And as always, we're starting with the top 4 most expensive reprints that you're going to find in the deck. Remember though that these card prices are going to go down significantly after the Precon is actually released, as more and more of these cards are flooding the market. So the most expensive reprint is Eldrazi Conscription. It's currently $13 and basically turns any enchanted creature into an Eldrazi. Weirdly enough, it's more powerful outside of Eldrazi decks where you can cheat in the aura for free. There's a bunch of ways of doing that, and then it's just a really powerful finisher. Eldrazi Monument is particularly spicy in the Eldrazi deck because you're going to have a bunch of scions and spawns that you are more than happy to sacrifice to its upkeep cost, and then all of your creatures are flying indestructible +1/+1 creatures, which is super fun. I'm also super stoked to see Morphon the Boundless here. It used to be the de facto Eldrazi commander back when I wrote my primer on the 5-color Devoid Eldrazi deck. I did it exactly when Morphon was released, actually. So it's really nice to see a reprint here. And then finally, Eldrazi Temple. It's an Eldrazi card. It's been creeping up in price in anticipation of Modern Horizons 3. People are super stoked about Eldrazi Matters once more, and it gets a nice reprint over here for $9. And also keep in mind, folks, these are not going to be the same card versions you're going to be finding in the Precon itself. It might have different card art, and it absolutely will have different set symbols because they're going to be matching set symbols with the rest of the Modern Horizons 3 Commander cards. All right, now let's check out the rest of the reprints. We're going to be starting with creatures and working our way from the lowest mana value to the highest mana value. So we got Waterscape Battle Mage, which is like a Reclamation Sage ++ in the Eldrazi deck. Very sweet. Eldrazi Displacer is excellent in terms of blinking any Eldrazi that we have on the battlefield that has powerful enter the battlefield or leave the battlefield triggers. Glaring Fleshraker is also quite good. It just promotes casting color spells, which this is what our deck is all about. Val Redeemer is a great way to, after a board wipe or whatever, immediately rebuild with an army of tokens. Then we have Sifter of Skulls, which is a card that I just forgot the name of when we were talking about Azlask, the secondary commander, and it's one of the best cards for it. Ulamog's Nullifier works very, very well with our commander Ulalek. It's a counter spell that is Eldrazi specific and just works really well with the deck. Titan's Vanguard is another new card from the main set, and it just grows really big. And then Deep Fathom Skulker, it's thematic card draw for a deck. That's awesome. Drowner of Hope is a really efficient way of just making more Eldrazi Scions, and we can sacrifice them to tap down potential blockers or attackers. Endbringer, I don't really like Endbringer that much, but it is very thematic, and you know, if we have enough mana, then it can do things, I guess. Oblivion Sower, I absolutely love. If we're exiling a bunch of our opponent's libraries, then we can get a lot of ramp afterwards. Sire Stagnation works very well with Oblivion Sower, also great card draw. Worldbreaker, it's very expensive, but it is targeted removal that we can also get back from the graveyard, which is quite nice. Elder Deep Fiend, you know, we can tap down some stuff, which is cool. Ulamog's Crusher, it's fine. It's a big old classic Eldrazi with Annihilator 2. Artisan of Kozilek, very nice. Also Annihilator 2, but also comes with reanimation. Then we have Ugin the Ineffable, which is one of the best cards you can run in the colorless deck because it just flat out gives all your spells basically 2 less cost to cast, which is really, really nice. And then you can start sniping some permanents off the battlefield if they're threats, or you can start generating some card advantage and also have chump blockers for you as well, which is nice. Ancient Stirrings, it's okay here. Suffer the Past, I don't think is very good, but I mean, I guess thematically it works well. If you're looking at the art and flavor text, I just don't think it's a very good card. Warping Whale is very cute. I like it. I like it a lot. And then we've got Crib Swap. Again, it is Kindred Shapeshifter Changeling, so it counts as an Eldrazi spell for the purposes of Eldrazi Matters like our commander. Kozilek Return, very thematic, very nice. Return of the Wild Speaker, we have a lot of really big, huge creatures that are Eldrazi's, so we can draw a ton of cards off them. Ugin's Insight is very good in a deck that has a lot of high mana value spells that we can reveal with it. It's not super consistent or anything, but it is solid. Then we've got Rishkar's Expertise, just like Return of the Wild Speaker. You can draw a ton of cards, but then you can also cast a spell for free, which is quite nice. All this does is probably the single best card in the entire deck. It just absolutely destroys all of your opponents who are not super like colorless heavy, I guess, while leaving your entire board state untouched, which is really nice. Skittering Invasion, it's overcosted. You know, you're only getting 5 Eldrazi spawns for 7 mana, but it is an Eldrazi sorcery, which is nice. So it benefits from synergies there, and it's also a colorless spell. And it also works with like the Eldrazi Tokens Matters theme. Still overpriced, but it is very thematic. Then for artifacts, we've got Everflowing Chalice, Soul Ring, Arcane Signet. Idol of Oblivion works really well here because we have so many Eldrazi token generators. Then we have the Talismans, and these work very well because we're a 5-color deck, so we do need mana fixing, but we also want to be casting colorless spells. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to do that with, you know, mana fixing talismans that can both tap for mana, but also tap for colorless. So Talisman of Curiosity, Dominance, Impulse, and Resilience. I would have liked to see like all of them, honestly, printed here, but whatever. Herald's Horn is nice in a Kindred deck. Hedron Archive, do not like it here. I would have much preferred a Talisman, but whatever. Mystic Forge, though, fantastic card advantage engine in this deck. Forsaken Monument, an all-star in a Colorless Matters deck. It's going to be super, super powerful here. Dreamstone Hedron, do not love it. Awakening Zone, it's really nice ramp and also feeds the Eldrazi Spawn Token Matters theme. Garruk's Uprising, giving a big Titan creatures trample is really nice, and the card draw is really nice as well. Imprison the Moon, thematic removal, not the best removal for this deck, but it is very thematic. Obviously, it's like imprisoning Emrakul over here, and it's never a bad card, honestly. Like if you put a commander under it, they're going to be very, very sad. Then we've got the lands. And again, like the talismans, the best way that we're going to be mana fixing, getting access to all 5 colors to cast our spells, but then also casting our Colorless Matters spells and paying colorless mana costs is the Pain Lands. So Adakar Wastes is here. Love to see it. Ash Barrens, more Pain Lands, Battlefield Forge. I think all 10 of them are here, which I'd be very happy about if true. Bonder's Enclave is okay. Brushland, love to see it. Cascading Cataracts, I do not like. It just costs too much for the mana fixing, and until you have that 6 mana available, it doesn't do much, so I don't like it. Caves of Coilus do really like, though. Command Tower do really like. Corrupted Crosswords, really love here. Eldrazi Temple, obviously love here. I mistake bringing it over here because I already covered it, but yeah, it is here. Exotic Orchard, great here. The Painlands, also great here. Opal Palace is fine. Path of Ancestors is very good because we are a Kindred deck. Reliquary Tower, it's fine. We're not going to be drawing that many cards that I'm too worried about keeping all of them at all times, but whatever. Ruins of Oran Reef is very cute. I like that you're putting +1/+1 counters on stuff. It's very, very good if you're focusing on Eldrazi spawn tokens, though, because you can poop out a whole bunch of them all at once and then tap this and give them all +1/+1. That's really nice. Then we got Secluded Courtyard. Again, we're an Eldrazi deck, so it can tap to do amazing mana fixing for us, but it'll also tap for colorless when that's appropriate too. Another Painland, Shrine of the Forsaken Gods, fantastic here. Spawning Bed, not very good. That activate ability is oppressively expensive, so I don't like it. More Pain Lines. Tectonic Edge, I think, is a little bit too much for a 5-color mana base. I would replace this with basically anything that taps for colored mana. And then Temple of Malady and Temple of Silence. Wizards of the Coast cannot help but put temples in all of our Commander Precons. I think they're super grossly overhyped. There's much better options available to most of these decks, even at the lower budget range if they're trying to budget the Precons or whatever. Tendo Ice Bridge, did not expect to see this here, but it is here. It's all right. Two in the Spirit Dragon, really, really sweet, really cute, especially if you're going like go wide Eldrazi with the tokens. Tranquil Landscape and Twisted Landscape are very solid. They're all right. And then we've got Unclaimed Territory. Again, we're a Kindred deck, so this is the type of lands we really, really want to see. The Pain Lands, really want to see. And then one waste, just one waste, just to tell you like, hey, we're an Eldrazi deck, so here's your waste. If you're, searching for a basic land for whatever and you're looking for a colorless one, there it is. That's nice. And then finally, here is the full deck list. Overall thoughts, I am much more hyped about the Eldrazi deck than the energy deck. And that's half because I don't really gel that much with energy. It's not an archetype that really speaks to me personally, and that's just entirely personal preference. That's nothing to say about the Precon itself. But the other thing that really excites me about this particular deck is I was kind of disappointed with the last Eldrazi Precon, the one with Zulduk that was straight up colorless deck, because it didn't really feel like an Eldrazi deck. It felt like false marketing, very misleading, because it even said, I think it was called Eldrazi Unbound, but it really wasn't really an Eldrazi deck. It was just like an artifact deck, really. And this really feels like a proper Eldrazi deck. And also, I personally did a 5-color Devoid Eldrazi Precon Primer when Morophon came out, and I was running a lot of these type of cards, and it's really cool to see a deck that kind of felt like I was reaching a little bit to fill out all the slots in the 99 previously with Morophon. Kind of see a big influx of new cards to fill out that archetype and see how it is when it's fully fleshed out. And even then, even with just the Precon, there's so many upgrade potentials available to us, like the big Ugin and the main set cards that aren't printed here. And yeah, it's really fun to see a fleshed out 5-color Colorless Matters Devoid Eldrazi deck finally appearing, and something that I can actually play. So yeah, between this and the energy deck, I'm personally very hyped for this one over the energy one, but we'll see what the other 2 Precons will have for us. So that's it for the video. Like and subscribe if you like this sort of content. I'll be back tomorrow and the day after to cover the final 2 Commander Precons coming with Modern Horizons 3. And then I'm going to be doing a ranking guide. I'm going to be ranking all the Precons and upgrading them. And I'm also going to be ranking all of the legendary creatures that can be your commander from the main set and the commander products. So it's going to be a huge video. It's going to be a tier list, and I hope you enjoy it. So until then, friends, see ya.